Hi there. Welcome back to the channel. Today, a list. It's a 3 list, but it's really not a top 3 list. It's what I would say, starting at number 1, the best sample wrapper. At number 2, the middle of the road sample wrapper. And at number 3, the worst sample wrapper. Now, there are probably half a dozen to a dozen proprietary sample wrappers out there. And I could have done a list and included them all, but the important thing here is distinguishing between the 3 that I've chosen, why I like the one that is number 1, and why I don't like the ones that are number 2 and number 3. And this gives them opportunities to improve, and you can make your comments known in the comments. You can tell me if you think I'm totally wrong and you love one proprietary wrapper over another. And I guess I should define what I'm talking about when I'm saying a sample wrapper. A sample wrapper is basically just the user interface that the software appears in and allows you to select the instruments. It can be synthesizers, it can be drums, guitars, all manner of keyboards, orchestras, choirs. Just because it's sample-based doesn't mean it can't be synthesizers. One of my favorite sample-based synthesizers is Retro Machines 2. Very cool product. Anyway, let's get on with this and start with number 3. This is my least favorite. And before I say anything bad, I want to say something good. The product is from East West, and it's their Play interface and their Opus interface. I don't particularly like these interfaces, but before that, let me tell you what I do like about East West. Great sound quality, great libraries. If you don't include one product that I own that just has a lot of stuff in it, and I bought it as basically a collection, I own more East West libraries than any other company. Mostly because they're accessible, affordable, they're good quality. Also, another thing I like about East West is that they offer both a subscription plan and a purchase plan. I'm not a subscriber. I don't like that model. I think it's parasitic on me or anybody else as a musician, but some people like it. I'd much rather buy it and own it forever. That's just me, though. Anyway, I have 9 of their libraries. 7 of them are excellent. Number 8 is okay, and number 9, it's not that I regret purchasing it, but I'll probably never use it in a queue. But anyway, let's set the way back clock for about 15 to 20 years. That is when East West was called East West Quantum Leap. And if you've been around a while like me, you probably remember that. And they were a great company, no doubt about it. Whether you like playing Opus or not, or, it doesn't really matter. I was using their libraries back then at other people's studios. I didn't own any at the time. They were way more money than I could really afford. I enjoyed using them because they were in another company's proprietary interface. Now you set the clock forward to about maybe 10, 12 years ago when I started buying more libraries. And I bought my first library from East West. That was probably 5 or 6 years ago. I think it's around about that time period. I don't remember which one it was, but it came in the Play interface. And I was disappointed. I was hoping it was going to come in this other company's proprietary interface. And I'll get to that company later on. The Play interface isn't bad, but it's big and it's pretty, but it has a lot of wasted space. Now, I use a template like a lot of composers, and most of that stuff is in the background. If I need to select a library from East West, like something that's orchestral with legato and vib and blah, 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 I can just activate that track and it's there. But if I need to edit it, it needs to come up on the screen. And if you've ever seen me when I have stuff playing in the background just for fun, you'll notice that I cascade a lot of the little interfaces. And I do that because I really can't fit them all on the screen at the same time. because they're not dynamically resizable. And I would love to see that in some of these interfaces. I would also like to see them be in a 16:9 ratio, because that's what a 1080p screen is in. That's also what ultra high def is in. And remember, it's 4 1080 screens. And it would allow you to fit a lot more of them on the screen at the same time. I just like to do it. I know some composers don't. The worst thing about Play and Opus, to me, is the tree system for selecting sounds. It looks like Windows Explorer 3.1 from 1989. Seriously, it really hasn't progressed much past that. You start with picking an item. It might be a string sound. It might be a synthesizer. Then it gives you a subcategory, bright synths. Then it takes you down to pads. Then it takes you down to motion pads. Then it gives you a list. At that point, I've already fallen asleep, or my creativity is starting to wane. I know for some people that use this stuff all the time, maybe it's pretty quick. And like I said, I have a bunch of their libraries, but I still find it laborious. It slows me down. That's my biggest complaint about the library. Play was not multi-instrument, but it was multi-articulation. And Opus improved upon that by being multi-instrument. So that was a big improvement. But Opus is another large interface that doesn't dynamically resize, and there's a lot of wasted space. The dialog box could be a lot smaller so that if I make it bigger, I can read everything a lot better and see everything I need to see. Let's talk about number 2 on my list. Number 2 is the proprietary interface from Spitfire Audio. To Spitfire Audio's credit, they offer some of their libraries in another manufacturer's proprietary interface, and then they also have their own proprietary interface. Let me say some nice things about Spitfire Audio before I continue. They are my go-to library. They are my go-to libraries when I'm composing orchestral music. Spitfire Symphonic Orchestra Professional is what I've been using for years. I love it. I augment that with some instruments from BBC Symphonic Orchestra and some instruments from Albion 1. Those 3 I just love. What I love about their libraries is just the warmth in them. There's something about the warmth there. I like the libraries from East West. They're epic, in your face, and they can sound really good and really big. But there's a harshness to them sometimes. And that harshness is in BBC Symphonic Orchestra, where it's not in Albion 1 or SOP, Symphonic Orchestra Professional from Spitfire Audio. So I've said some nice things about them. Let me talk about their proprietary interface. My first interaction with their proprietary interface is when I purchased BBC Symphonic Orchestra. I guess I must have overlooked the fact that I wasn't going to get it in the other interface that they had used prior to that, which is owned by another manufacturer. And I'm going to get to that in a minute because it's number 1, and you probably already know the interface I mean. Their proprietary interface isn't bad. There are a few things I take exception to. Once again, it's a pretty big panel, and there's a lot of wasted space, even more so than probably East-West on Opus and Play. There's a lot of wasted space that could just be radio buttons for me to click on the articulations. Now I know I can use key switching, and I know I'm using an orchestral template, and I have individual tracks, so it's really not a problem for me, but for other people. And also when I have something that I call audition, and it's just sometimes I click on that, activate it, and it's everything within a certain library, within a certain family of instruments like violins, so that I can go there and I can go through the articulations and just remind myself of what I really want. Do I want concertino or do I want sottasto? I mean, sometimes I really need to hear it. You know, I'm not Hans Zimmer. I've got to listen to it, right? To make a decision, think, yeah, I think it would sound better this way or that way. And it's not as helpful because although I like this interface more than I like Opus, a lot of times they'll give me the articulations and they'll maybe be 4 or 8 on a screen and I can click on the little radio buttons. But if I want more, I have to advance it to the next screen and then click. There's plenty of room on that first screen. All of them could be right there. And maybe they think that would make it look cluttered or what, but it would just be better. It would be simpler and more handy. And we definitely need that, at least I need it. The other thing I don't particularly like about the interface is it's bright white. Now, you know I love high contrast. I love my Kronos. Black background, white text, love it. This is the reverse of that. And so what we have is this bright white interface with black text. Like a lot of studio musicians, I like a darkened room environment when I'm working late, or even just when I'm working, period. My room's pretty dark. And when I have to call up one of those panels to edit it, it's like a beacon, just, it's blinding. Sometimes I need to turn on some overhead lights because the light differential hurts my eyes. Anyway, maybe that's just a minor thing. And remember, this video is not intended to be a rant. All these interfaces are usable. I just deal with it and I'll use them. But they could be better. And so I'm trying to help. And you can help too in the comments. You can tell me, no, you're wrong. It should be this way. And that's okay. All right. Let's talk about number one. And then we need to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Number one, I think, is Contact. It's just been around forever. I have sample libraries up here on the shelf that use Contact 2. That's how long I've been buying libraries. And it's a standard in the industry. I like the fact that I call it up and pretty much it's the same every time we see it, even when they update it. 7, they did a few things I think that upset some of the user base. But you don't have to activate those screens. You can just use what was in the older versions. And it's still familiar and easily used. My favorite thing about it is a lot of different manufacturers write for that interface. And I can see all those instruments over here on the left-hand side. And I'm doing this from your perspective. So you see all those instruments on the left-hand side, and then you can load them into this area here. And it's just so easy that way. I have Damage 1 and Damage 2 by Heavy City. I have Sound Iron, not Sound Iron, I have, Cinesamples. I have Cinesample libraries, and they're in there. I have Spitfire audio libraries, and they're in there. And I know I have some other manufacturers too that I'm not remembering. I mean, I have Chevanai. I don't remember the name of the guy that did that. It's a great, great library. And that's in there. And it's all in one place. And I know it's a ton of libraries, but I never find it overwhelming because I have them all sorted by category. I have all the vocals in the same place, all the pianos, and it's easy to scroll and get those right away. Once again, I'm using a composing template, so it's not that big of a deal. But what's nice about when this loads up, the companies that appear to write for Contact seem to have it down. And Spitfire Audio, my hat's off to you here. Albion 1, simple as heck. I love using Albion 1 to start my composing on a new project. What I like loading up is Albion 1, and it's standalone in Contact. I don't have to load up my DAW, and I'll load up the spiccato or the spiccato-staccato combo, or the longs concertino, and I can just load those up, and the little radio buttons are there, and I can just switch between them if I want to, and start playing, and start thinking about ideas. I don't do that with the Play interface or with Opus. Yes, it will run standalone, but then I'm going down that stupid tree trying to find sounds. Now, I could set up some presets, but it's just so much easier to load up Albion 1. And I like the sound in Albion 1 better anyway. But I might at least consider going into Opus if it was just more user-friendly. It's not that I don't know how to use it, and so user-friendly might be a misnomer. Maybe if it was more productive and straightforward and just saved me time, and it doesn't. The thing about BBC Symphonic Orchestra is it won't run standalone, so there's no argument to make for that one. But I use Albion 1, which is a Spitfire audio product anyway, and I use it in Kontakt. Now let's talk about the 800-pound elephant in the room. And I'm just going to talk about this in general because I don't have all the details on it, and I probably never will. Why would these other companies create standalone environments or standalone sample wrappers when they could just use Kontakt? Well, Native Instruments charges a licensing fee. How much is that licensing fee? Well, I looked online and it's really hard to tell, and probably bigger companies can probably negotiate a better deal. But what it looks like is if you're a big company and you're going to have a pretty big distribution, meaning several thousand copies, it's going to cost you 3% of the purchase price. Now, what do you get for that? It's a little hard for me to tell from the documentation, but it looks like they're going to supply you with all the serial numbers. They're going to be the gatekeepers, which means your clients or your musician purchasers, they're going to log on and use the Native Instruments Access app to go ahead and order the product, download it, and then authorize it. Then also, obviously, Native Instruments is going to encrypt the data so it can't be easily pirated, which is a good thing, right? So you're getting value added for that. I don't know if Native Instruments also supplies the download servers. I don't think they do for that price. Maybe that's an option and you can pay more for that. If you're thinking about a big orchestral library like BBC Symphonic Orchestra, which is obviously in Spitfire Audio's proprietary interface, let's imagine they decided they want to put that into Kontakt. How much would it have cost them? Well, 3% of the purchase price. And if I remember correctly, when I purchased it, I paid $749, which was a discount from what was going to be $999 full retail after the initial period. They were trying to, sell some initial copies and get it out there. Makes sense. Now I think it sells for less than that for the professional version, but I don't remember. But it's $749. 3% on that, I think, is around about $22.48 per copy. Okay, now I don't know how many copies Spitfire Audio sold of BBC Symphonic Orchestra Professional, or the Core, or any of the other versions, but the professional version was $749. Let's say they sold 50,000 copies, and I don't know if that's a gross estimate or I'm way under, but anyway, it makes the math relatively easy. $22.42 or 40, whatever it is, it's something close to that, times those 50,000 copies is over $1.1 million that they would have to give to Native Instruments. Now, they are getting value for that. They're getting a registration number, a serial number, and they're getting encrypted files, and it gets to be used in what's, I think, pretty mostly accepted as the most common sample wrapper out there. So they're getting value for it. But you'd have to figure any company would have to sit down in an office and say, how many copies do you think we might sell? If it's 50,000, somebody says, well, maybe 50,000. And they've probably got a good idea of how many they were going to sell, probably based on previous sales and market research and what they think the market is. And then maybe somebody might say, Well, how much would it cost for us to hire 3 programmers to write our own interface? And how long would that take? And maybe somebody would say 3 programmers working full-time for 6 months. And that could happen concurrently with all the editing that's going on with the sample library they've just recorded, BBC SO. Now, I don't know exactly how many programmers you would need and how long it would take, and you might be able to farm that out to a consulting company or another programming company and have them write it for you, but then not license it to you, pay them a one-time fee, and then own it. But let's just say it was 3 programmers at $100,000 a year. Even if you're only hiring them for 6 months, but you're going to pay them for the entire year, we'll say, that's $300,000. It's a no-brainer. That's, almost only, that's 75% less than $1.1 million, just about. It makes sense to do it. And so I can understand Spitfire Audio and East West developing their own proprietary interfaces. Also for Spitfire Audio, they have their, I can't remember the name of the series, and I should have looked it up. I have Drumline and a little choir from that series, and it's really good. And I think they were $29 each. And so I can understand on a product like that, using your proprietary interface. There's probably not going to be a lot of articulations, so there's not a lot of stuff to click on. But I'm still not a fan of the interface. Understand that. So there's a balancing act here. Now, I recently did a rant about NI and their complete series and their upgrade path. And I heard from a lot of people how they've been bought out by equity companies and whatnot and passed around. And it does seem that they have lots of other little companies supplying them content that they add to their complete product and put it out every once in a while. There certainly was an overwhelming amount of comments on my side favoring the fact that they're just not the same company they were anymore. They're just not putting out anything that is very compelling. One person mentioned Contact and the fact that they would hate to see Contact go away. I don't think there's any risk of that. I think it's going to be the leader for some time. But as other companies decide to develop their own proprietary interfaces because they don't want to have that money skimmed off the top by Native Instruments, Native Instruments may find themselves in even worse shape than they are now. So hopefully they'll think about that. I have plenty of complaints about Contact as well. I have created a lot of my own libraries, and there's no really easy way for me to make my own little tab over here and have a picture of that library and be able to click on it. There's all kinds of ways you can retrograde your version of Contact back to 5, create it, because back then you could do it, and then update it to the latest version. But that's crazy. It just seems that if you own the full version of Contact, you should be able to create your own little icons over here and have your own personal libraries that you've created and have them in there, rather than put them in the quick load interface. Now, I can understand why NI wants to keep the gate on that and wants only the people that pay for licensure to be able to do that. But that sure would be a nice feature to have. That might cause me to at least upgrade my version of Contact. But right now, 7 is working fine. There's no libraries that I have that are beyond that, so I'm not going to worry about it. So that's it for my 3. I would say Opus and Play are just, I don't like the tree system. For me, it seems like a lot of extra wasted time, and it's not helping anybody. And I think they could do a much better job by getting those instruments with just radio buttons and names and clicking on them, rather than having to go down a tree. There's got to be an easier way to do it than that. The Spitfire audio interface, it's not bad, but it could be better too. And I think just Contact's the best, probably just because it's been out there for a long time and so many manufacturers use it. I have most of my stuff in Contact, and I'm happy about that. All right, you can tell me in the comments which interface you like the best. I know people will probably comment on things like Vienna and some others, and that's cool. I'd like to hear your comments. Anybody think the Contact's the best? Anybody thinks Spitfire Audios is the best? How about Opus and Play? Let me know on those. Thanks for watching. Take care, and I'll be back in another episode soon.